Fuck yeah, boys. Time to get him. Achilles! Yeah! Oh. Fucking archers, man. Need to form that Steel Phalanx. Come on, guys. You can do it. No. Get them shields up. Get them up. Come on, guys. Gotta get that beach. Yeah. Form the fuck up. Yeah. Yeah. Fucking Steel Phalanx. Time to go. Yeah. This guy's fucked. Yeah. Oh man. Hey guys, this is VaulSC. It's watching me some Troy. This is a movie that came out in 2004. Apparently, Corvus Belli, the creators of infiNity, were really big fans of this movie, and I think you guys can tell when you look at the names of some of the guys in the Steel Phalanx Sectorial from Aleph, and that's of course what we're going to be talking about today. I might just turn the sound down a little bit, put this in the background. So yeah, Steel Phalanx is the oldest sectorial in Aleph. For a while, it was the only sectorial they had. Then OSS came out. Oh my god, I'm just going to put this on mute because it's so fun to watch, so distracting. And we're going to be talking about today, we'll go through all of the profiles, break down the units, talk about strategy and so forth. It's Ajax. I need to minimize my webcam just so we can watch him. Row! So Steel Phalanx being one of the oldest sectorials, when they first, well, I can't really talk about when they first came out because I started infiNity in 2015. And when I first found out about them and heard about them, they were actually the first starter set that I picked up because I thought they looked so cool. And when I heard other people talk about them, it was generally like, oh, you know, they have ODD, everybody's -6 to hit, they're really order efficient because of the Infinikos link teams, they're great in close combat, they're pretty good at every different range, so they're one of the more feared sectorials. So, you know, I tried to steer clear of them in terms of, you know, thinking they were an easy beat, so to speak. However, they are still one of the oldest sectorials, and over the years, hate to say it, but infiNity is a game where there is power creep. So the newer sectorials have been getting better and better and better. We've been seeing Fatality level 2 and these wildcard link teams, and of course you've got symbiomates and post-humans, and there's all these other things that other factions are, you know, getting better and better at utilizing. Whereas Steel Phalanx is starting to age a little bit poorly. When I first, you know, was trying to think about dealing with them way back when I first started, I'm looking at a unit like the Rushi, which has assisted fire level 2 on it a lot of the time, and you're ignoring smoke, you're ignoring the ODD, you're ripping up their NWI with your assisted fire. So there was one unit at least which was a real counter to that. And then you think, oh well, the Marut also can do a similar kind of thing. But nowadays you've got the Mukhtars as well. You've got any old TR bot, well actually the TR bots don't ignore the ODD, but my point is there are more and more things showing up in the game that are good at dealing with the whole ODD NWI archetype. Having said that though, Steel Phalanx definitely isn't one of the weaker or worst factions in the game. They still have Achilles, as you can see here right now, fucking carving up. He does this in-game as well. Hector, maybe not as good, but we will go over him in this video and review that. But they still have the order efficiency from the Infinikos. They still have access to reasonably cheap things, a couple of net rods, still have all of the bots to go with them. If you are intent on doing well in ITS with Steel Phalanx, you are identifying the, I think we're at the end of the video now. Achilles, fucking Achilles. They even modeled the new sculpt after Brad Pitt. I thought that was so funny. Anyway, where was I? We're going to give this sectorial a really good breakdown. We're going to talk about some lists and have ourselves a bit of fun. But yeah, if you are thinking of just diving headlong into Steel Phalanx, it just pays to be aware of the fact that this is the faction with some very clearly defined strengths and weaknesses. And you'll find after playing a lot, if your goal is just to try and do really well and try and win and give yourself the best chance in every game, there are unfortunately some profiles which are a bit too old now, in need of a buff, aren't going to help you as much as others, and we'll work out what they are in this video. I really do feel like this faction overall could do with some buffs and an overhaul. Hopefully they'll get them in N4, but you never know. Popcorn is great. Alright. Let's get into it. Alrighty. So you got Achilles, Sergeant of Dactyls. So this faction does not have access to the Sophotect, which Aleph normally does, the wonderful Doctor/Healer. So you have to sort of find that in other places. You also don't have the Posthumans either. So that's where the Dactyls usually come in. If you hit the Dactyls profile, there is a Doctor profile or an Engineer profile. We also brought out that new Defiance character. I can't remember whereabouts she is. Maybe they haven't added her to Army 6 just yet. I can't remember. But you've got Machaon as the Engineer as well. So there are a couple of other options, but the cheapest, most basic ways of reviving unconscious troopers and remotes, things with structure points, would be the Dactyls. These guys can form up into their own Inamatarkos Link team. It's just that they're a bit expensive. If you compare what these guys do to your basic Tokusetsu Doctor or Pano Trauma Doc, you're paying an extra 10 points for the ability to doctor things. So for that 10 points, you're getting the gear, you've got the stats, but usually, you know, you're wanting to get your other stuff fighting. You want Hector and Achilles and your Myrmidons in the front line doing the face-to-face roles. It doesn't really seem that appealing to me to have your doctors and engineers also designed for fighting, because you typically want to keep them alive, keep them back. Having said that, if you really wanted to, you could have a couple of doctors, you could have an engineer, and then you could put Achilles with them as well, and you'd have an Inamatarkos Link team, where if you lose one guy, there's still going to be that ability to go around and revive things. But you can also make use of their gear with them all grouping up into a bunch. Don't love this, but you can sort of see how it would work, right? Because maybe you've got a TR bot elsewhere in the army, maybe you got some things which can be revived with your doctors, and then you've got this full-on Link team, 6th Sense Level 2, extra burst for adhesive launcher, Nimbus grenades, all of the gear that they get. If you're going to go this route, I think it is worth taking Achilles in there, just purely because he adds something that the other three don't, and if you're going to have 4 models, it's less worth it to double up on more doctors or engineers when you can just put Achilles in there and have the access to the Panzerfaust, which the group kind of need. They also give him +1 ballistic skills, so if he's leading that particular team, he can be the point man. Having said that, the Dactyls usually go best with Hector because he's got a special fire team where he can group up with them. So if you are going to run a bunch of Dactyls like this, I would usually recommend it would be with Hector. But if it's just going to be these guys, I'd like to find another way of doing it. Thing about Doctor in the Sectorial is that your Myrmidons, they're going to suffer against shock because your opponent's going to generally be wanting to utilize their shock units to take out the things with NWI. So the Doctors may not find many corpses on the ground to revive. That could be a bit of a problem. You're still kind of going to want a Doctor, though, if you are going to be running like a Nagima Sniper or Tusa or Atalanta. So taking a Doctor by itself, Dactyl Doctor, may be a better way to go, in my opinion. But yeah, Achilles got Dogged as well. That's kind of cool. The Dactyls all have Dogged. But again, I think this is going to start to reinforce this theme that this faction definitely has a vulnerability, a weakness to shock ammunition. And what you're seeing in other sectorials and the newer stuff coming out, all the power creep, a lot of stuff's getting shock immunity and NWI. So if you've got a sectorial here where one of the main features of it is, Dogged and NWI, but without shock immunity, it's a bit of a vulnerability how freakishly common shock immunity is nowadays. Let's talk about Andromeda. She was one of the newer additions to Steel Phalanx, just coming in more recent times, but she's fairly unanimously and universally disliked by the community just because they didn't make her strong enough. They made her have a really awesome model, and the concept of her is pretty cool, but she has some pretty glaring weaknesses. One of them being that she's expensive and she's only got, again, 1 wound NWI without shock immunity. So again, 1 shock round from a submachine gun or something is going to take her out. She would usually start in your deployment zone unless you're using the forward deployment version. Note that OSS got a superior infiltration version which almost made her viable, but Steel Phalanx still stuck with just the forward deployment level 2 one. I would definitely recommend taking this specific profile if you're going to give her a go in Steel Phalanx, because she needs to be able to get up the board, do work with Specialist Operative, and close the distance. She's only got short range stuff, so that's one of her other failings. The guard level 3 looks really tasty, but again, if you're in close combat with something that's like a real close combat specialist, they're going to have martial arts level 3 a lot of the time, and a CC stat higher than 20, so it's going to start becoming quite even. And then, of course, if it's a ninja just coming in using surprise attack to kill you, you're at a really big disadvantage overall. But yeah, the one thing that she can kind of do is in the active turn, press some buttons, do some midfield fighting, maybe creep up on something and attack it in close combat. But there's usually just so many other things that can do that. I would probably rather run with Thrasymedes for his ODD. But there is a corner case argument for saying, well, this is a sectorial, it has heaps of stuff in the deployment zone, you're really hurting for midfielders, so take Andromeda for deployment level 2. Again, it's just a pain that she's a full 34 points, doesn't have marker state, she's a bit of a liability. Alright, Diomedes, and we'll talk about Ectromoy at the same time because this is the real drop trooper of the faction, not really having any other drop troopers at all. My feeling is that if you're playing Steel Phalanx early on in the strategy discussion, you should be thinking about whether you're going to commit to a 10 order limited insertion list that's going to run some of the big boys, either Achilles or Hector or Ajax, Eudoros, some of those sort of people, or whether you're going to go for a 14 to 16 order list, and I do mean that specific range. Less than 14 gets a bit more awkward, more than 16 you spread too thin. But if you're going for that 14 to 16 kind of order list, it is an option to take the Ectromoy either in Group 1 or Group 2. You might have Thamyros, the Oidos, or a Evo repeater just to put up controlled jump and try to get an Ectromoy or Diomedes down their back line. I've heard people say that they either love these guys or hate them. They either get a lot of mileage out of them or don't get much out at all. I'm actually one of the rare commentators that would have a bit more of a middle ground view of these guys. If you look at it as just a platform with a combi rifle nanopulsar or boarding shotgun nanopulsar, what you're paying here is a roundabout right for the impact that a drop trooper could have. You drop them down to the back line or come along the side, and your opponent, maybe it's later in the game, there's some openings, you can actually get in there freely and start picking things off. You definitely get the value out of those points. That's a cheap number of points to pay. You have some other interesting options here. The HMG, this faction is actually very light on HMGs. This guy brings one for you. Or the basic chain rifle nanopulsar, not very good for something which is trying to land and attack in the active turn, but you still get a pistol. It is a meager 20 points, which I think is a bargain for a model with these stats. And what your goal is to sort of try to get into close combat, force them to dodge, and then you whack them with your double action martial arts level 3 kind of thing. So even this 20 pointer is okay. I mean, you drop this right next to a tag or a lieutenant and it scatters off the board. Well, it's only a 20 point model. But if it sticks, I mean, you can take something out quite easily with CC19 MA3, right? DA close combat weapon. So I find that quite powerful. But just coming back to it, we're talking about super jump as well. So given that this platform is fine with just a combi rifle and paying 28, 29 points for that, given that you're still getting decent value, even if you aren't using martial arts level 3, and even if you aren't using super jump, even if you aren't using either of them, you're still getting a decent drop trooper out of it. BS12 armor 2, that's fine, you're going to get some kills. But the fact that he has those 2 additional abilities to actually get a lot more value in some rare cases is pretty important. Super jump does mean that you're going to be able to drop next to some weird building with some very weird architecture, jump up and shoot their lieutenant. And maybe they'd covered a lot of places on the top of that building with mines and things, but being able to jump up in the air and shoot them means the difference between winning and losing sometimes. And MA3, that's actually a really rare ability for drop troopers. So Ectremoy, I really recommend them, again, if you're running that more robust list of 14 to 16 orders. If you're running a 10 order list, you're usually trying to funnel everything to just Achilles or just a really powerful 4-man link team to do that. Even the assault hacking device might have some corner cases, or that might be a bit more mission dependent. But then there's Diomedes. The thing about Diomedes is that you really are splurging at this point, and one of the problems with more expensive drop troopers is that usually you're a bit reluctant to take a risk with such a big investment. You want that number of points to have an impact every single game. So Diomedes some of the time is going to show up on the side of the table and not really be able to really do that because he's up against flash pulses, hidden deployment missile launcher straight away, or if he's dropping in there, sometimes he's going to whiff that and end up in your side of the table, and it just will not have been worth it. But if you're confident that you can play a KG game, that you're patient enough to walk him on the side later in the game, if you don't mind taking that risk to drop him in, of course he's going to be better than Ectremoy because he's got NWI and he's got an assault pistol. And NWI is a bit better in the active turn than reactive turn because you can choose your fights and you can pick your battles and you don't necessarily have to go up against Shock. You can, and even when you are going up against Shock, you can usually beat them in your face-to-face roll because he's BS12, he's got the guns, assault pistol's really nice. But still, if you're thinking of having a bit of a AD, airborne deployment, drop trooper game, I'd recommend taking the Ectremoy more often than Diomedes because, again, he's a bit of a liability. And obviously, don't take the Lieutenant profile because he's going to be off the table and you'll be in Lost Lieutenant right off the bat, which is pretty stupid. Between the Mark 12 and the multi-rifle, I kind of prefer the multi-rifle because then you're the one with shock and AP. Both guns are burst 3, and the multi-rifle is usually going to be the correct range band, whereas the Mark 12... you're dropping in next to them, so you're always going to be close enough to get in range, and occasionally you'll be 8 inches away. You can sort of see the argument for using the assault pistol within 8 and Mark 12 beyond that, so I don't mind it, but overall I kind of like the multi-rifle better because the double action and reactive turn and the ammunition types in the active turn. Dactyls, Steel Phalanx's NCO. Again, we're talking about power creep, and factions are getting the NCO ability where they can spend the Lieutenant's order on them, which is quite a powerful ability if you look at what the Mowang can do with the Lieutenant level 2 in Yu Ching. But even though Dactyls has the letters NCO in his title, and even though Sylar has it as well, neither of them actually have that ability, which I find a little bit of a slap in the face to Steel Phalanx. Imagine if they did, though. I mean, you could have Machaon over there in the Link team, or Phoenix as your Link leader, or even a Myrmidon officer, and you could spend that Lieutenant's order every turn on these guys, and they are quite order-hungry troopers. Let's look at Dactyls first. So his main draw here, most people feel, is his albedo, actually. He's just 1 wound NWI, so if this guy dies to a shock round, again, a huge wad of points is going down the drain. But albedo can be a really handy piece of tech if you're hunting down those annoying Mukhtars, or if you're trying to get across the battlefield in the face of that Kamau sniper on a Link team. This is a really good piece to have because you can close the distance and pick off targets, and of course if they're screaming across the battlefield to kill you and they've got an Aquila Guard or Marut or whatever it might be, Rushi, in the Deshat Link team, you are invisible to that model during the first game round, so that really makes things better for him. But, you know, you got to be careful when you're strategizing around having a unit that's good against some things but not others, because you're usually going to have this goal of trying to win 5 rounds in a row in a ITS event, and you're wanting to take things that are going to be impactful every single game, which makes this guy a little bit iffy in my mind. Let's take a closer look, though. He can either have the Combi Rifle or the Red Fury. Definitely prefer the Red Fury because better range bands, just better gun overall. You want shock rounds, especially for a model starting in your deployment zone. He's just a light infantry, so that'll be happening. Assault very rarely comes up. Jungle terrain very rarely comes up. Free agent not going to come up that often in Steel Phalanx in my view. Martial arts level 2, nowhere near as good as martial arts level 3. So he's got a few abilities which are kind of, you know, you're paying for them apparently, but you're not getting huge value out of them in the long run. The Diva bot also has a albedo to keep up with him and just a flamethrower, so a little bit like, you know, an orc spot. Very useful to have these Diva bots defending your deployment zone, because with Steel Phalanx being so fragile and having very few, well, basically no skirmishing warbands out there just to trade with people with their chain rifles, it could be useful to have an extra guy hanging out, poking his head outside of cover, able to do discovers and things like Daylamis and impersonators, and help to defend your deployment zone against suicide squad bikers and things like that, trying to get to your juicy myrmidons at the back. So yeah, he's not terrible. I think this guy's pretty average once you take everything into account. He's definitely not one of the things about the faction that really scream value to me. But Scylla, I think that she's a little bit more interesting, because as the hacker, you do have a bit of a tool in there which Steel Phalanx don't have otherwise. So if we go to her, we look at these profiles. They all have boarding shotguns. You could take the regular hacker, which I don't mind, because if you're going to be taking the Ecdromoy and dropping him in, you're going to want a hacker. When we come to Themiris, or whatever his name is, we'll realize he's not that great, and same with the Evo repeater. Again, that's quite expensive. But also, if you're only buying her for that, then she's not worth it. It's better to take Themiris or something like that. The reason why you would consider taking her is that she does that role of putting up the support wear, but at the same time, she has that Diva bot for defending deployment zone, pumping out some discovers against things incoming, like we just talked about, but also that attacking potential where she can move or in range of something that has to react to both the flamethrower and the boarding shotgun. Note that she has a nanopulser as well, so if they fire at her, for example, and you really want to kill them, you could nanopulser and flamethrower them, for example. Not bad in close combat either, and she's got a CCEM weapon. Unlike Dactyls, she doesn't have NDPI, so it's just a bit squishy. All things considered, I really find the Killer Hacker Maestro upgrade with a single Diva bot, or even double, I guess, the profile to go for. The killer hacking device means that you can take out a few of the things that might threaten Hector or Achilles. You can go into Cyber Mask, which is actually a pretty big deal for crossing like fire lanes, getting around there. Nothing else in this faction really has Marcus State, so she's a bit of a rarity really. If she's going for that last gasp to try and press some buttons in the middle of the table and you need to get there, you could Cyber Mask first, then head out. Willpower 13, not the best, but it's still going to be better than Whip 12, and you're still going to want to make that dice roll. Regardless, as long as you've got enough orders to spare if you miss one or two. Yeah, the 2 Diva bots version I think is okay. I would take that if I'm really worried about my deployment zone being, attacked. If I'm planning on going second some of the time, if I'm really worried about things coming in and just trading up, the Diva bots can stand out there and sacrifice themselves to act as speed bumps, basically. So she's a pretty good unit, very good offensively and defensively, and the killer hacking with Maestro kind of handy. I like it how the Diva bot has a repeater, so it can move ahead of her, and the Diva bot, so long as it moves in range of an enemy hacker, she can use her second short skill to hack them through the repeater of the Diva bot. Nice. Okay. Themiris the Aoidos. Know that this guy saves you about 10 points, so if you're only wanting to do support wear, and if you need a journalist for the missions, this guy is a bit better, although I don't like the fact that you're having to spend the extra points having an assault pistol and the nanopulser in the picture, and realistically I'd rather have the Kappa hacker who's like 17 points or something stupid, or the Nox Trooper hacker who's saving you like 7 points here compared to Themiris. You're not usually wanting to move out and attack or defend with your hacker. Obviously, this guy is better at going and fighting with his assault pistol, blah, 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 compared to those hackers I mentioned, but usually, infiNity, it's better if you have a model that's a specialist for a role, really is just going to kick the crap out of that particular job that it's going to have to do, and be as cheap as possible because it hasn't got any gear for any of the other jobs that it's not going to be able to do. So if you imagine the perfect infiNity faction, you've got cheerleaders, leaders who don't have any bells and whistles that are super cheap, and then you've got an ARO piece that's, you know, good on armor and really good at shooting, and you know, maybe linkable kind of thing, but you know, is pretty weak at attacking. Then you've got stuff that just screams over the other side of the enemy line and, you know, efficiently cleans stuff up. You know, imagine a faction like that. Wink, 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 wink to Shard Company. Cough. But Steel Phalanx not one of those factions a lot of the time. You're having to spend a little bit of bloat into your troopers. But yeah, Thamyris, comparing him to, say, the Evo hacking device, he saves you a point there. I like the Evo hacker because gives you some weird and wonderful support wear, but Thamyris also, he's going to obviously fight better than the Evo repeater, and there are some hacking programs that the Evo hacking device doesn't have, so depending on what else is in your list, you may take one or the other one if you just want a basic support wear type of hacker. Warcores are a Warcore. Then we come to the Agema Marksmen. Yeah, again, Agema Marksman, very old profile. Steel Phalanx, very old Sectorial. You might think this guy's very, very good because they have a lot of smoke going out there very easily. Note that they don't have any impetuous smoke like the other factions do. And this guy, again, he's just a single wound guy, Blister Skill 13. You compare him to the Kamau and the Nis and the Intruder, he really isn't as good a value as those guys, even for their points. But sometimes you will want to take him, just because this is a faction which is a little bit light on the AORs. Usually it's going to be between the Agema, or Atalanta, or Chusa. Those are the three models that typically do the really long range AORO sort of game. My recommendation is that if you really are going to be committing to this guy, usually the multi-sniper rifle is the best of the three, and try not to just position him in partial cover watching the entire table in turn 1 when they have first turn. If you do that, they're just going to pick whatever the best HMG there is and just shoot you, and it's going to be their 4 or 5 dice versus your 1 BS13 attack. So don't just throw them away like that. There are other things in this faction which can defend, so maybe just keep them in total cover and then bring them out in the active turn, bring them out to ARO from turns 2 and 3 onward when they have less things to hit you with and when they have less time to do it with. So that's the way. If you really want to, you could go the Mark 12, you could use his medium infantry extra 4 inches to deploy a bit further forward and use the smoke grenades and move up and attack, but honestly, this is a sectorial where there are better things to do that with. You think of Eudoros or Phoenix or whoever it may be with their guns in the attacking turn and their link teams, gonna do that better than this guy, because even if he's shooting at them through smoke, if they don't have MSV2, well, your ODD from your other troops is going to do that job just as well. And with the missile launcher, yeah, I mean, it packs more punch than the multi-rifle and multi-sniper, and it's cheaper, but the range bands are a little bit easier to get around, is my problem. And sometimes you're going to want to attack with this guy in the active turn. Missile launcher doesn't really allow you to do that as well, so I don't love it. Then there's Atalanta, who I've never actually seen on the table ever, and most people are agreed that she's just a bit too expensive. However, I'm kind of curious about her actually, and again, NCO without the actual NCO ability. But I'm kind of curious though, because 10-bot E basically, if I remember correctly, just gives you +3 blister skill, and I'm going to look it up while we're talking. There's 10-bot there. But MSV2 Sniper, BS14, she's doesn't have NWI, and I think that's one of the problems with her, is that you're spending 39 points for something which will just die to one single hit. But if we go 10-bot, let's just remind ourselves of what the spotter does. So, bonus mod of +3 to blister skill and willpower rolls when declaring blister skill attack or discover. So she's basically always blister skill 16. That's pretty powerful. If you imagine putting up her up in some sort of sniper tower and you're up against Huxlam or something and they're moving out with their Ghazis and impetuously throwing smokes and things like that, she's going to have a great time. And if they've got no long-range guns, I mean, this is the kind of model that could dominate a game. But for 39 points, you look at what other factions have got. You know, you're talking about a BS16 or 15 sniper in a link team with 2 shots and maybe some mods like MSV2 and mimetism in the case of the Kamau sniper, for example. it's not uncommon for models in this game to shoot back with ballistic skill, well actually 17 in this case I should say, BS 14 plus 3. But even if you look at what military orders are doing, you know, you've got a Father Knight with 2 shots, BS 17, and the missile launcher, 6 Sensible 2 kind of thing. It doesn't have multi-spectra visor level 2, but again, Atalanta is a bit old, and you know, you're not going to feel great if you're trying to watch the table with her and just one random HMG beats you. You know, if you're going up against one TR bot with assisted fire, well, you don't have shock. It's 4 dice and 14s versus 1 dice and 17. If you win, their engineer revives the bot and they try again. And if you lose, that's a 39-point model that just died, never to be seen again, and you lost the 1.5 SWCs as well. So a bit of an ask, a bit of a tall order, but I think if you play her well, play her carefully, she's not the worst thing in this faction. I think that she should be given a chance occasionally. Thrasymedes, you get 2 very different profiles with this guy. He's the Diaphos special character. He has Inamatakos, or however you say that, so he can join with Thorakitai. My problem with putting him with the Thorakitai, with the light rocket launcher, is that even though his profile's fantastic for that link team, you know, 30 points, and you've got this guy with ODD, BS12, SMG, light rocket launcher, all of that cool stuff. He's 4-2 speed and the 4-2 speed, and you're wanting to leave your deployment zone and get in range, because the light rocket launcher I think is 8 to 12, 8 to 24. So you're going to actually have to do some slugging through the battlefield, and you're going to have to uproot your team, move around corners, and they are just so slow at doing that. Even with the medium infantry deployment zone buff, I'm just worried that this squad will be a little bit too order intensive. If I'm wrong about that, though, and you've got tons of orders and you're able to get over there, though, he's pretty good at shooting and arrowing for his points. I really like that. The Infiltrator version, though, I think is a bit more popular. 27 points isn't too pricey. He's a very good fighter out in the midfield because of ODD. I mean, you're talking about Crocman levels of being able to win face-to-face rolls, but unlike the Crocman, he's got Armor 3, the SMG, stun grenades, nanopulsar, good in close combat, so he's just a better all-round fighter out there. You just got to be so careful with him because he doesn't have Marker State, so Marker State obviously makes the Crocman able to stay in hidden deployment until you need him, and you know, you've got mines on him, and blah 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 blah. So it's a bit of a shame. Given there's no other infiltrating choices apart from maybe the 4 deployment Andromeda, Thrasymedes really is a good model to take because you're going to need somebody to efficiently press the buttons. It's just a shame when you compare him to other factions. You know, if you compare him to Zeros and Foxtrots and SAS and Guilangs and Shroudeds, this guy really doesn't look super appealing from a mission completion standpoint. It's just that he's quite good at fighting. So again, with this faction, the theme is you've got to play them carefully. It's not an easy and forgiving faction to play some of the time. So just make sure every decision counts and be careful about his positioning. Nesai Alke, don't know how to pronounce this name, probably just butchered that, but she is a special character that can link with the Thorakitai. Namely, one of them is the Lieutenant option. So the Thorakitai don't have BS-13 and they don't have Spitfires. Where are the Thorakitai? Here they are. So she's a pretty good point lady, a point person to lead them. Not badly priced either. I mean, you're paying 25 points, but you're getting all those stats. You're getting the guns. I don't mind it. The Lieutenant, having to take her as a Lieutenant usually means that you're going to have to commit to a Myrmidon officer chain of command, which isn't bad. But, yeah, I don't really see what she brings to the Lieutenant kind of game. You've got to spend the order, the Lieutenant order, and then break the link team to be able to benefit from that, so I don't love it. And, you know, if she's going to be moving around with a Thorakitai and blasting things, it means you're going to be spending a lot of orders on them and relying on them a bit, whereas I prefer the Myrmidon teams and the other Myrmidon Greek special characters to be doing that. With the Thorakitai, which we'll just talk about now, the thing that I like about these guys is they're cheap. They can be cheerleaders and they can be a bit of a light ARO or long-range game at the same time without having to move very far. So you take this team here, which is just 61 points. You've got all of you got the Fort Observer and Paramedic there, your basic 360 Visor guy, and then there's a Feuerbach. So the Feuerbach with 6 Sense level 2, the extra burst, can be a bit of an annoying ARO and does it pretty cheaply. And then for certain things and classifieds you may need to complete, you've got these two. But you've only spent 61 points and you've got 4 orders, which is decent. Or maybe you drop the Feuerbach and you take the HMG. These guys are going to be hanging down, heads are down, they're going to be in total cover a lot of the time. And then when you do need to pick off a few, war cores, flash pulse bots on this side of the table, or take out, an out of position trooper that's just run out of steam in their turn, it becomes your turn. Stand up, shoot with the HMG, then go and hide somewhere. And that's all they really need to do. So if you can get away with that without spending on Nesai, then I think you should. I don't really see her bringing a lot. I mean, the Spitfire starting in deployment zone with only 4.2 speed, I feel like that's inferior to the HMG, to be honest. HMG has the better range bands for that part of the table. And you save a couple of points as well. Probably not worth it for the extra. I mean, the extra Ballista skill is nice, but again, I think the range bands are more important for what you're getting there. So if you're going to run a lot of Thoracites, God, the pronunciation in the Sectorial is difficult. Anyway, if you're going to run a lot of these guys, I would recommend a setup like this, an HMG or a Feuerbach and the other 3. If you really want to, you could put Hector in there, but again, they're going to want to keep up with Hector, and they can't do that as well with only 4.2 speed. So if you're taking Hector in the link team, the Dactyls are probably a better way to go. Or just put them with the Myrmidons, right? Alright, Patroclus. This is a bit of a homage to the movie, and the Odyssey, the Greek mythology, where good old Pat, he's dressed up as Achilles, and he moves out there and he leads the Myrmidons, because Achilles has gone hiding, he's not fighting, so the Myrmidons and the army basically need to be inspired, so he pretends to be Achilles and he goes out there and he gets himself killed, because Hector easily kills him, and then, as spoiler alert, by the way, then Achilles finds it out and goes after Hector in the movie. Spoilers, from 2004 this movie is, by the way. Anyway, so his main play is Holo Projector level 3, which allows him to pretend to be Achilles and have the extra body doubles up. So you've got 4 Achilles even running around the battlefield, only one of which is real. And you still are able to maintain the duo at the same time, apparently, if I'm not mistaken. So that can be fun, but at the end of the day, the holoprojector ability in general is just not very strong in this version of infiNity. It does need an update. Hopefully it will be buffed in N4. It's just a bit too predictable. It's a bit too easy for opponents to figure out where the real model is, what's really going on. As soon as you move the real model in line of sight of them, they can just delay, then you shoot. Yes, you apply surprise shot for that one order, and they can shoot back as normal. It's pretty straightforward. It's not like camo markers where they just can't attack you at all, right? So you're moving out, they can delay. If you shoot, they shoot back. If they really want to, they can just randomly pick one of your holo projectors to shoot at, and then you could shoot them, and if they get it wrong, then you win, but that doesn't come up as often. And once you have revealed him, once holo projector is gone, you're left with, again, a guy who's quite expensive, who isn't in a link team other than the duo with Achilles potentially, and again, just has NWI and a single wound. So you're gonna be kind of upset if this guy just walks through and triggers a crazy koala or a mine and just dies, regardless of whether he's pretending to be Achilles or not. Or if he just happens to get whipped by an SMG or a TR bot with assisted fire on it, or Rishi, or whatever it may be, Mukhtar, he's gonna be kind of in a bit of pain. If you're going to take him at all, I still prefer the ODD. We'll talk a bit more about ODD when we get to Achilles. But again, I mean, Mukhtars, Rushis, Maruts, Gaurel snipers, there are some really hard counters to this guy out in the game, and that makes me find him a little bit less appealing. Martial Arts level 3 is nice, 6-4 speed is fantastic, but he's just so flimsy. Like, I hate that. If you can get away with doing a lot of damage, then he becomes a bit of a discount Achilles, but the real draw of Achilles is that Achilles has 3 freaking wounds, and ballistical 15, so you spend the extra points, but all of the extra stats are worth it, because when you're funneling all of your orders into one attack piece Rambo model, as we saw in that clip there, then you want that model to be as efficient as possible, and I just don't feel that this guy really does that, which is why usually you just see Achilles out in the field. If you can think of some clever way to use Holoprojector level 1 or 2 that I haven't thought of, or if it gets buffed, that's when we're going to go back to being interested in this guy. But as a general theme, as you go through infiNity the game and you look at all of the things in the game that have Holoprojector level 2 specifically, they generally aren't as good as other things for their points. It's just a sad fact of life. So we're going to go to Teucer now. Teucer, according to the mythology, was a guy who was really good with a bow and arrow. They've given him, in the science fiction version, a Feuerbark or a K1 sniper. Don't, for the love of God, don't take the K1 sniper. It's one of the worst guns in the game. It's basically like a sniper rifle that only does a damage 12 hit. Yes, it ignores all your armor, but it's not worth it for the drop in damage and the loss of extra, armor saves being required. It really isn't. So you're wanting to be choosing between the X-Visor or the MSV2, and almost always you're going to be going for MSV2 because it's a more useful ability than X-Visor. He's usually going to be in the correct range band anyway, and MSV2 is such a powerful ability, you wouldn't want to, give up. You wouldn't be trying to sacrifice the 3 points or whatever, or trying to spare yourself the 3 points I was trying to say in the 0.5 SWC. For a weaker version of it. It's definitely worth the plus 3 points, plus 5.5 SWC. Again, he has NWI and just 1 wound, but with his abilities, sometimes he can be fine with arrows if you know you're not going to be up against a shock attack. So if you're up against an opponent who you can see is not really taking any shotguns, he can be worth just watching the table with. But the thing is that he also attacks quite well. So you can hang him out, 16 inches out on top of a building. Climbing plus can be really useful there for relocating a little bit. And later in the game, he defends very well. And in the active turn, even with just 2 shots, he's going to be quite a bit of a terror on an open table in the offensive turn, because you can find that angle, ballistical 14, you've got your 2 dice, the Feuerbarks can be very powerful there. So I find that quite strong. If you're really wanting a robust ARO piece in your list, I think he's probably the best choice between, if we're not going to go for the Agema, we're not going to go for Atalanta, and we still want somebody long range, this guy would be it. When you go to the Myrmidons, I think Phoenix is the longest range kind of gun. And Phoenix, out of all of the ARO pieces in the Sectorial, probably is the best. But again, sometimes you're going to be wanting something with a bit more punch long range, and sometimes you might prefer the MSV2 compared to the heavy rocket launcher. It's just that Phoenix, being in the Link team, 6 and level 2, kind of hard to beat. But yeah, Teucer, I see him quite a bit. You've got to be careful with him, just like anything else in this very fragile Sectorial. But I do like his capability of attacking and defending. He is a bit expensive. I don't think he's one of the better things in this Sectorial, but I think that he is viable so long as you do go for this middle profile here, the MSV2 Feuerbark. So that is Teucer, and I think it is finally time to talk about Achilles. I think probably a lot of my commentary here, Achilles is a pretty old, concept in infiNity. He's been around for a long time, and when the 10th anniversary edition came out, they brought out the new Achilles, which gives him forward deployment level 1 and increases his armor, and he has options to have various other things here that he didn't before. Having said that, I'm a big believer in only ever taking vanilla Achilles with Spitfire. Only ever take that profile. It's either going to be the basic Achilles or the Lieutenant, just one of those two. And I'm sometimes called on to make the case over and over again, and the argument for why this is a better way to go strategically than your Hoplite Armor Achilles. And my reason is that Achilles His job is to move out around the table and get himself into as many favorable face-to-face rolls as possible and get as much done before you run out of orders as possible. Because when it's their turn, he is vulnerable and they are going to find a way to get to his heel and kill him. As you're walking around the table, you're going to be shooting at some things which, are pretty easy to beat, like Warcores and Flash Pulse bots, but you don't ever want to lose to them because your run's just going to be shut down and your turn ruined if he does get Flash Pulsed. And he's also going to sometimes be surprised by stuff coming out of hidden deployment, so you may need to split your burst. He may also be deliberately coming into line of sight of several models at once because he can't really avoid them, and you'll be splitting your burst. And you want to be in a situation where you are inflicting as many hits on them as possible. Not just winning the face-to-face roll, but causing enough hits that they're going to fail all their armor saves and you can move on to the next target. So, for example, you move around and you're up against a doctor with a combi rifle and a flash pulse bot. And they're both in cover and you're not in cover because you're moving across the battlefield at a rate of knots. And you're splitting your burst, 2 on this guy, 2 on the other guy. And let's say, you get enough hits on them, but the Flash Pulse bot, you only get 1 hit on, and he passes his armor save. Well, you have to spend a whole new order shooting him again. Let's say you roll like you're shooting like all 4 bursts against the 1 Flash Pulse bot, and you roll like a 1, a 7, 12, and a 20. And the flash bot rolls like an 11 or something like that. Let's pretend that 11 is a miss against ODD, but a hit against mimetism. Well, you still win with your 12, so he does have to take 1 save, which he might pass the arm save for. But if he fails, if he's up against ODD, that's 3 hits which go through rather than just 1, in which case he just dies straight up. Now, it's not always going to happen like that, but you're going to find that Achilles is attacking so often, having so many orders spent on him, and so many dice rolled as a result of him. With the weight of numbers and the law of averages, there are going to be enough situations where you needed ODD over and above mimetism to cause those additional hits, to get through them quicker, that it's just really a no-brainer to always take ODD wherever possible. This is a model that's built for winning face-to-face rolls, not losing them. So the Armor 6, although it's nice, is something you're only really relying on him on using when he doesn't win the face-to-face roll, and you're not playing in such a way that you're coming up against, deliberately coming up against any models that can beat him. You're going to be avoiding the long-range stuff at long range. You're going to be moving around cleverly and actually taking the fights you want to take. And you really need ODD for that. In the reactive turn, yeah, they're just going to ignore the ODD with MSV2 or whatever it may be, and he may need some armor if he's going to be AROing. But the thing is, you're either going to be standing up in front of cover and taking some hits and dropping prone anyway to act as a speed bump, or you're just going to be in total cover the whole time. And in either case, the difference between Armor 6 and Armor 4 really isn't enough to warrant losing the additional bonus from ODD. I really feel strongly about this, guys, and I'll fight yous. I'll fight any of you about this particular issue. I've played Achilles a fair bit. I've played using him and playing against him, and I really do feel like the ODD in the long run is more useful, even at the loss of the armor and even at the loss of the forward deployment. It really is that much of a difference, because you're not just constantly attacking stuff that has MSV. You're attacking a huge range of enemy models, and you're wanting to try and get there and really stomp them with Achilles. I've played games where he just stays in the deployment zone for the entire first round, and you don't get any value out of him, and then he just simply wins the game in turn 2 or 3. He's just capable of doing that, and he's one of the better things in the Sectorial overall, and one of the things that the Sectorial's known for. If you're running a 10-order list, it can be a good strategy just to go with Achilles as a lieutenant and the Myrmidon officer as the chain of command, and just fill the rest of the list out, and you've got an 11-order push, and that can sometimes be enough to make this a decent, viable Sectorial, just off the back of that. I do note that the Hoplite Armor version brings in the DEP. That's kind of nice. But his stats are otherwise pretty much just the armor that changes, really, so I would still recommend Achilles with ODD. Let's talk about Ajax, who we saw in that little movie clip, not wanting to let Achilles get all of the glory. And Ajax is reasonably costed at just 39 points and effectively 3 wounds because he's got 2 wounds plus NWI. I kind of like that. His weakness is that he doesn't have ODD at all and is usually hanging around with people who do, so generally they're just going to pick on him a bit more. But with Armor 5 BTS 6, and if he's in cover, and if he's got 6th Sense Level 2, he can actually be really, really resilient, and I don't actually mind him. I don't think he makes the best lieutenant, unless you've got, that chain of command, but putting Ajax in with the Enematakos group, if you can afford him, like if you're not breaking the bank on Achilles, Hector, and a lot of other expensive stuff, he can be quite a good leader for those Myrmidons, because if you're worried about your natural counters like the Mokhtars and the Rushi screaming across the battlefield to start blasting you, Ajax can kind of sit in front of them, plap off some AOs against them, pass some armor saves, and once it goes down to NWI, you fall prone into total cover, and they may not have enough orders to follow that up and wipe out your Myrmidon, so he's quite a good obstacle to that. He is kind of handy too because in the Link team, no doubt you have smoke grenades. He doesn't have them himself, but he's going to have them around him. So the Myrmidons plant the smoke in, maybe Eclipse smoke if you've taken Machaon or one of the guys that can produce that. I believe that the Myrmidon officer can do that. Yep, there you go. And then he moves in, and in close combat, obviously he's a beast. He doesn't have martial arts, but Natural Born Warrior and Berserk still kind of, bash them up pretty badly there. You imagine going up against Shinobu or, what's his name, Miyamoto Musashi, and you're basically countering their martial arts ability with Natural Born Warrior, and you can Berserk them if you want. Hopefully they're not going to monofilament blade you, but even then, if you're just trading directly, sometimes it can be worth it. But yeah, you could just attack them normally, and NWI, the Natural Born Warrior would kind of help to actually just win the face-to-face roll if you're really desperate. Or you could just, nanopulsar into the cloud. That's fine as well. He does have Impetuous, but being in the Link team, that is suppressed until he leaves the Link team. So pretty nice, really. I don't think he's the first thing you'd put into your lists, but if you can see an opening, if you've got some spare points and you can fit him in, he's a pretty good upgrade to a single Myrmidon if you've got other Myrmidons in the Link. For the reasons I mentioned, he's got that robust durability, and that's one of the weaknesses of this faction, and you can plug the hole there by putting this guy in and having him fulfill that short-range to mid-range ARO kind of space. And gosh, 6th Sense Level 2 really helps when you're trying to defend. Time to talk now about Hector. Hector, again, much more recent than Achilles. He has a wonderful looking model, and he is quite an interesting profile. Like Ajax, he doesn't have ODD, so that is a weakness. Like Ajax, he's very tough, 2 wounds, NWI, all the armor and BTS. But you are paying an extra 30 points for him, and that's the problem. For that extra 30 points, what are you getting above and beyond Ajax? That's the problem. So one thing is the plasma rifle. I generally prefer that over the Spitfire because the plasma rifle, the amount of damage it does really means you can't leave it at home, in my view. The other thing too is that he's a bit of a different kind of close combat artist. He's got MA4 instead of NBW and Berserk. I mean, both of those things are good. Hector is just as much of a danger in close combat as Ajax, just in different ways and slightly different for different circumstances. Adding in the Strategos level 1 does mean that you want him as your lieutenant, so you never want to take the top 2 profiles. You always want to take one of the bottom 2, and when it's between Plasma Rifle and Spitfire, I would almost always recommend this profile here. You can also save yourself 2 SWCs by taking a Plasma Rifle, even though arguably it's more devastating than the Spitfire is. Tinbot can be good to stop him from getting hacked, so that's nice, but again, 71 points. It's a huge, huge investment. And if you are playing Hector, I would usually recommend doing that in maybe a 10 order list. You can save some points by linking up with just the Dactyls, so that makes it a bit cheaper. Actually the Thorakitai probably are even cheaper than that. So the Thorakitai is probably the cheapest link version you can do. So if I grab a Fort Observer and an HMG and a Paramedic, kind of like the Paramedic out in the midfield, or even better, probably the Engineer actually, because you don't want Hector to be isolated or immobilized. So the Engineer is probably even better for that. So 124 points for 4 orders, and that's a little bit more reasonable now. Only problem with the Thoracites is that the 4-2 speed and have a bit more trouble keeping up with them. So again, it might be better to go the way of the Myrmidons. So you've got the Lieutenant, might have a chain of command with Eclipse Grenades, very, very useful against all that MSV2 stuff. And then you grab a couple of basic 16-pointer guys. Now you're spending 138 points, but they can all keep up with them. They've all got the smoke grenades, Eclipse Grenades, good close combat fighters. They all benefit from 6th Sense Level 2, and that's generally the way to run it. Again, I keep saying this, but it's about the points a lot of the time. Hector can't really cause as much destruction and damage as Achilles does, and in games of infiNity, it's very decisive. You kind of need to. If you're going to spend 11 orders just walking Hector's team across the table, he's just not as quick as Achilles, not as agile, not as aggressive as Achilles, and you might end up stranded running out of orders and then losing, whereas Achilles can move in, dart out, hide somewhere, and possibly survive the reactive turn. Hector, not as good at surviving the reactive turn as Achilles, I must say. But he does look very cool. I'm going to briefly talk about the remotes, even though I usually skip them in my sectorial videos. The thing about the remotes is that you kind of need them because they do stuff that you really don't get with your Myrmidons and your Thoracitai and guys like that. So Sensorbot with climbing plus 17 points, actually not a bad investment because you don't have a lot of really handy flexible button presses in this mission. Also, to get your good abilities to bear on enemy markers and hidden deployment stuff, having a sensor is just really not a bad idea. Once you've revealed their ninja out in the middle of the table, it's just so much easier to just pounce on them with, a decent combi rifle in a link team, or something with the Natural Born Warrior and just smash them in the head, to be honest, or even just one chain rifle nanopulsar can take him out, but only after he's been revealed. So yeah, but because the rest of the Sectorial just doesn't have anything like this gear, your basic humble Sensorbot's pretty good in Steel Phalanx. The Lamed Rebots really love these guys because, again, such an expensive Sectorial, you're wanting to take the cheap cheerleaders and this is about all you've got, so just chuck them in there. Net rods, you can take 2, not the 3 you can get in vanilla, but you're going to want to take 2 if you're not running a limited insertion list. And sometimes, even if you are running a limited insertion list, you've spent so many points having Hector and Achilles and all of your expensive guys, then you've got no choice but to pop a net rod in there. I don't like it because you could scat off the table and you'd be left with like 9 orders, which is ugh. But never forget the usefulness of a 4-point order in a Sectorial like this. Probots, it sucks you can only take 1 of them because, again, you need the cheerleaders in there. Sometimes, like I said before, the Evo hacking device is also kind of cool. I like the idea that you could put the overclock on and have the Lamed Rebots fire twice with that, but also the bots, the Diva bots that these guys come with. So if you're going to be taking Drakios and Sylar and the Flash Pulse bots and an Evo, you could make all of the robots attack twice, which might not be bad. Having said that though, for the points there, it may be worth just investing in the hacking device Sylar or Themyros if you're just going to be putting support wear only, because those guys have a better suite of abilities for the more active stuff, right? Okay, Probots, Samic Rebots, that's the Smart Missile Launcher. I don't think it's a great idea in the Sectorial, just because there are so few things which can set up the targeted state that we're really wanting. Yudbots are Yudbots, Zayan Rebots. This is a faction which, as we've seen, doesn't have a lot of HMGs. And to take one HMG that has assisted fire, that's pretty much going to be better than your other options. It's probably better than the... Yeah, I definitely would say it's better than the Thoracitai HMG, because you've got shock and you're ignoring cover. It's better than the Ectromoy HMG. And none of the Myrmidons can take HMGs, so if you're really struggling with that range band, don't forget about the very humble TR bot, because this guy's not just for defending, he's for attacking, and a lot of the time he attacks better than defending, and this version has Climbing Plus, which is quite special. Not every faction has the ability to have Climbing Plus on their TR bots, so I like that. Eudoros, this guy came in the classic Steel Phalanx starter set. He is in the movie, Troy, and I struggle to like this guy. He is a full 40 points, and yet again, I keep saying this, but just dies to anything that has shock, so there is that. Any minor crazy koala or SMG can just take him out. The Mark 12, pretty good damage, but only burst 3, goes up to burst 4 on the Link team. Has ODD and BS 13, but yeah, it's just such a struggle when they've got a Gaurel Sniper or Marut or something like that. It is tough, even like an Intruder. Just so hard to deal with. The number 2 is kind of nice, but as soon as you start losing members of the Link team, things are going pretty badly. I mean, that's a bit of a band-aid. It's more like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff rather than the fence at the top. Martial Arts level 4 is always great. CC 21, not as good as it could be. I like my close combat monsters to have CC 23 plus, but you know, you can't always have everything you want. But I mean, just imagine you've completed your turn, you've got some kills, you're about 16 inches out on the table, and some stupid crackot renegade comes charging up to you and just blows you up with a chest mine from Berserk, and this guy just goes away. I don't love it. I don't love it. Imagine if he had bioimmunity. That wouldn't happen to him, and BTS 6 would come in handy a lot. Then we have Hipolito, which is brand new, the most recent addition to the Sectorial. She came out with the Wildfire box set. She works for O12, and she is interesting. She sticks with the theme of 1 wound, NWI. That's fine. This is an active turn piece, which is very mobile, and you're finding yourself jumping around on top of buildings. Most people can't do that in the Sectorial. You've obviously got your drop troopers, but she's a bit more mobile than that with her impetuous and her ability to move out, and doesn't have to, you know, spend an order dropping in at the table. So that can be pretty cool. And unlike the Ectromoy, she's got ODD, so when it does come to the firefights, she's bringing the breaker rifle to bear. All the games that I've had with her in O12 and Aleph, I've really started to like her. The thing with O12 is that you've got Varangian guards which sort of do her job very, very well, but in this Sectorial you don't really have that. It's just that in the Sectorial you have a lot of other troopers who are a similar number of points, so when you're thinking of whether to take Hipolito, it's like, well, do I take her, or do I take Dactyls? Or do I take Silas, similar number of points? Or do I take Thrasymedes or Penthesilea or Phoenix? I mean, they're all costed in a similar way, which is kind of awkward, and she can't go on a Link team. So it'd be best to take her, I think, if you're not running something super aggressive like Achilles or an Andromeda. If you've just got a bunch of defensive Link teams, TR bots, that kind of thing, and you're wanting something for that point slot, and you've got your Link team sorted out already, then you put her in there and you try and get some damage with her by playing her as aggressively as possible. Eclipse Grenade's also lovely. I might have forgotten to mention, but we've seen some characters with explosive close combat weapons, like Hector and Achilles and Ajax and Hipolito, and some with just double action. Steel Phalanx can have a pretty good time in the mission looting and sabotaging, because they're pretty good at getting over there, and Eclipse Grenades are very good for that mission. Stealth's great for ignoring jammers, and explosive close combat weapon and Berserk in various places really will do a number on that objective. Machaon, a lot of people love this guy as their lieutenant, and I kind of agree with that. I love the fact that you could spend the lieutenant's order, doctor somebody, reform the Link team. I think that's really, really cool. He's a decent fighter with his combi rifle. Having Eclipse Grenades in your Link team is fantastic if you don't already have a Myrmidon officer, and because he's so survivable, it can sometimes mean that you don't have to take the Myrmidon officer at all. So in a Link team that I quite like, you got Machaon Lieutenant, Phoenix, and then just a basic couple of Myrmidons. And these guys are good at a lot of different range bands. If you're at close range, you just fire Machaon's combi rifle, and if you're at long range, you fire Phoenix's heavy rocket launcher. They've both got ODD. They've got both normal smoke and Eclipse Grenades. They're all monsters in close combat, and they've all got 6 Sense Level 2. They've all got ODD. So this kind of Link team for 110 points, this is where the real Inamatarkos efficiency comes in for Steel Phalanx, right? And even with them there, you can kind of afford to chuck in Achilles if you really wanted to. He doesn't have to be the lieutenant, or you could put in something else that's pretty strong, Diomedes. You put Hipolito in there, and you round out the list with a few more other expensive things. You might be able to go up to 14 to 16 orders with this sort of group. Really do like Machaon hanging in there with that. And at willpower 15, very, very reliable doctor. A lot of models in this faction have high physicals, so with his med kit, he's quite good at actually hitting things, and they're quite good at passing their physical check. Armor 2's nice. I think he's really solid, and for 38 points, getting a good lieutenant, getting good fighting stats, getting that specialist in there, being a doctor, I think's well worth it. So that's Machaon. The Myrmidon officer, like we talked about, it can be your lieutenant. It can be chain of command. I do prefer the chain of command because that allows you to have a combat lieutenant, and Steel Phalanx are very, very good at that. I definitely prefer the boarding shotgun because the Eclipse grenades are much better than the smoke grenades. You aren't going to be relying on MSV2 that much unless you're a huge proponent of the Agema Mark 12 or the aggressive Juicer. But if you're just using those guys as defensive troopers, the Eclipse grenades just generally are your friend, especially when you're defending. You've got the Rushi screaming around the flanks, and the first thing the Rushi sees is your boarding shotgun Myrmidon, and it's the chain of command, so they take him out, they haven't killed the lieutenant. But if this model plants the Eclipse grenades, and it's 16s on 2 dice, you can defend your entire link team for the rest of that turn. If they come within the smoke, then they're having to fight you in close combat, which is not going to work out for them. So really quite like that option. This profile at the top here, chain of command boarding shotgun, I think I would recommend that one. But as always, he's expensive. NWI, just a single wound. That is the theme. You've got to try and be careful about your positioning and avoiding enemy troopers. Gosh, getting pretty dark outside. Let me turn the light on. Alrighty, we're nearly there. We've been talking for just over an hour. Alright, let's finish this off. The Myrmidons, the bread and butter of the Sectorial. They are availability total. The favorite Myrmidon of the bunch is the basic chain rifle because at 16 points, he's just cheap enough to be kind of like a cheerleader. But he defends your deployment zone so well. And ODD with a pistol means that he's going to outshoot your Guangxi and your other sort of skirmishes. And in close combat, CC 21 MA3, he's going to beat 90% of other models in the game in close combat. So for 16 points, being able to do that's fantastic. He's got the chain rifle and the nanopulsar. So you're up against certain Ariadne troopers. Well, you respond with the nanopulsar. They've got no BTS, whereas some of the more exotic stuff in the game may have BTS 3, Armor 0. You fire the chain rifle. You can intuitive attack with both. Really like it. He does have an AP close combat weapon, but there are generally going to be other things in your faction to do the attacking with if you need to destroy an object like the looting and sabotaging AC2. So having a 16-point guy really keeps the costs down, which is going to be really important. The combi rifle guys, yep, you get what you pay for. There's nothing wrong with them. I just find that there are going to be other models you're going to be taking, like either Eudoros or Machaon or Ajax or even Hector, that are going to have the gun for that range and are going to be better at shooting it. So the combi rifle Myrmidon's not always the pick there. Again, boarding shotgun, well, yeah, pretty good choice unless you already have the Myrmidon officer. Like if you've got him providing the boarding shotgun, you might not need him, but if you don't, boarding shotgun Myrmidon, no problem. The Spitfire, I like the Spitfire in link teams where you don't have another really good mid-range gun. So if you've just got Machaon and you don't have Phoenix, or if you have Phoenix but not Machaon, and if you don't have Ajax in there, if it's just a team of Myrmidons, let's take for example 2 Myrmidons, or even the Myrmidon Assault Hack, which we'll get to in a second, plus Machaon. This kind of setup's pretty cool because if you're moving out with them into the midfield and you've got opponents which are just beyond 16 inches, the Myrmidon with a Spitfire is going to be able to rip them up. BS12, the ODD, 5 dice Spitfire. It's well worth the 31 points with a single SWC. But yeah, it's just kind of about what else you have in there. I probably wouldn't take them as often if I'm running Hector. But there's definitely a lot of scenarios where that one Myrmidon with Spitfire is a useful addition to the team. The Assault Hacker, I mean, that sculpt is there from the starter set, and this profile's been around since the dawn of time, but since then we've had killer hackers in the game. When they invented this profile, killer hackers didn't exist. Now that they do, I'm a bit wary of moving out into the middle of the table with an Inimatakos link team like this, and leaving my hacker there, because once you throw down the smoke grenades and stuff, they can still hack you, they can still kill you. She's not very good at defending the hacks, and this is not a sectorial which has a lot of useful pitches and link teams and deployable repeaters and stuff like that to take advantage of hacking them, and not a lot of repeaters. So the assault hack is not great unless this is the only thing that you can feel like you can afford to be able to take your bot. So if you don't have any hackers whatsoever and you need something to be able to put remotes into your list, sometimes it's worth doing. But since Sylar's in here now, usually I'd just be running Sylar with the killer hacker, and that's enough to allow you to afford remotes in your list, so you don't really need the assault hacker as much. So Don't particularly like the Assault Hacker, to be honest. Just a Willpower 13 BTS 0 hacker. Probably not really worth it. Bit of a liability. And then we come to Penthesilea. Wonderful model. Even the old sculpt is wonderful. The bootleg version is wonderful. It's just, again, I keep saying it, just one wound, NWI, no shock immunity, 40 points. You don't want to be running into a mine or a crazy koala or a crack-out renegade or whatever it might be. There's so much stuff in the game that can just insta-remove her. When she's attacking, yes, she's very fast, drives around the battlefield. Yes, she's great at beating up flashball spots because she's got Combi Rifle ODD. And yes, in close combat, I call level 2 and CC22s nice. Monofilament close combat weapons nice. But getting into the thick of an enemy line these days, you're going to have head and deployment troopers showing up. You're going to have chain rifle walls to walk through. You're going to have crazy koalas and symbiote mates and mad traps and riot stoppers. And it's just never ending. She's terrible at dodging because she's on a motorbike. And as soon as she gets off the motorbike, she loses all of her mobility. I'm sorry to say it, guys. Penthesilea is not one of the better models in this game. You may want to buy her just to paint up that beautiful model because she's just so cool. But she's not one of the better pieces to include in Steel Phalanx for winning games of ITS. I have to say it. If you've got the points to afford her, by all means go and spend those points on Hipolito and the remaining 3 points on a War Core because you'll get better value out of that compared to Penthesilea. Hipolito, you got physical 4 with Eclipse grenades. Way better at defending than Penthesilea, so she's going to be more survivable. Hipolito's better in close combat and, to be honest, is better at shooting as well. Not by much though, just because she has a breaker rifle instead of a normal combi, I suppose, is the only reason I'm saying that. And because she can get cover more easily. Actually, no, neither of them can get cover because of Impetuous. Well, there you go. Okay, about the same then with shooting. And lucky last, we've got Phoenix, one of the best profiles in this sectorial. I mean, you've got Machaon and Phoenix right up there. Really love those guys in terms of the characters. And Chus is up there. Achilles is probably near the top. And then it's like Hector and Eudoros and Ajax, I reckon. But Phoenix, really, really good because he's going to be in a link team with Sixth Sense level 2. So if they're putting down this smoke grenade and firing their Rushi at you, you can at least ignore the -6 penalty for shooting back. So you're going to be Ballistical 13. The only thing that kind of counters this guy are things that have ODD themselves, or a TO camo, or mimetism, but those models typically don't also have MSV2, so at least he'll benefit from his ODD. Maybe the toughest opponent for Phoenix might be a Intruder Sniper from beyond 32 inches, in which case he ignores your ODD, and you don't ignore his mimetism, but you do ignore his surprise shot, so there is that. And as soon as Phoenix hits, that heavy rocket launcher can be devastating because you don't get your armor bonus from cover for your armor save, and you've got to keep making saves until you die. He is rather punishing. So I would take this guy more often than not. Your SWCs aren't going to be too strained because, like I said, with Hector, you're going to try and take just the plasma rifle. If you're running Achilles, you're probably not going to be running much else in terms of the characters. Machaon doesn't cost any SWCs, neither does Hipolito. Sorry, I take that back. Machaon is 0.5. So usually you have some SWCs to throw around. Like I said, Phoenix, maybe not the Lieutenant, because he doesn't really benefit from being a Lieutenant, but Machaon definitely does. Then a couple of Myrmidons. So you've got a list that looks about like this. And then you could take a defensive Thorakitai link. So you go over to the Thorakitais. There you go. So maybe an HMG, Forward Observer, Paramedic, 360 Visor. You don't need much more than that. Take a couple of Lemon Rebots. So for the cheerleaders, you put Sylar in there. She's the killer hacker. She's quite a good offensive piece. And then you're moving these guys to Group 2. You can put in, at this point, Chooser if you wanted to. But let me go over here and grab maybe Thrasimides. In fact, you'd want the net rods as well. So you're already up to a list which has 13 orders and you've still got some points to spare. Then after that, you could throw in Drakios. You got the 1 SWC out of that. And you can start to see how you could build a list that's a bit more robust, has the 14 to 16 orders, right? What else was I going to put in this one? You can take the bot for the HMG, and you could put Thamiris in there as well. That way you've got assisted fire for it. So if we go find Thami, we've now got 15 orders, and because you've got the guy to put up not just assisted fire but control jump, you could put an Ectromoy in there as well. So we've got 28 points we could find. That works. So that's exactly 300 points, and suddenly you've got a 16 order list. The first group can move out with Phoenix and McKeown or Sylar, and then or even the TR bot with assisted fire to go and attack. Second group can put up assisted fire, a control jump, and land the Ectromos. So you've got a list here which can attack, can defend, has got plenty of orders, you've got heaps of ODD. I didn't put Thrasimides in there, so you could drop the Ectromos and put Thrasimides in there, and you've got a decent tournament list. It's quite robust. The other way to go, like we're talking about, is to play the real hard nuts, like Achilles Lieutenant. If you're definitely going to be doing that, then you definitely come and take the Chain of Command Boarding Shotgun Myrmidon Officer. Then you can go back and put Phoenix in there anyway. So you've got Phoenix for some defense, but not the Lieutenant version. Go to the Myrmidons, pop in a couple more Myrmidons in there, and you've got the just specialist in that particular group. Then you start filling out until you got 10 orders, and with 118 points left, you could still afford some decent guys in there. If I just put a couple of flashball spots to keep the costs down, what do we need is a hacker. So we could put a pretty decent hack in there. Again, Sylar, nothing wrong with Sylar over here. And yeah, I think another way to go is to take Phoenix out and put like Chusa in there. But you can sort of see what a 10 order Steel Phalanx list might look like when you've got Achilles as the leader, a chain of command to back him up. You're trying to go for first turn as much as you can. You just bust over there with him and hope that you get enough damage to get the win, get the snowball rolling. But a lot easier to do when you've got the ODD on him. Steel Phalanx, full of character, very fun Sectorial. I think I'll end it there. As you can see, the sun's gone down outside my window, and I didn't want to pause the video to go turn the light on. I don't do these videos in like multiple takes. I don't do any video editing. They're low effort videos. You guys know that about me. Shh, don't tell anybody. But gotta go watch the rest of Troy. Wonderful movie. Yeah, Steel Phalanx, old Sectorial, but they've still got it. They're not the worst faction in the game. They're probably not in the top third of factions, but if you play them well, if you are willing to play a faction that's not very forgivable, if you're willing to upskill yourself and make good moves, good positional decisions, you can do well with them. So hopefully you guys do achieve that.